Right, Eric is our presenter today. He is also the author of RUBI. He's going to give you a little bit more information about who he is, but I think you're going to be able to learn a lot. And I think the videos that he's going to share as well are going to have a lot of impact. So Eric, take it away.
Sure, great. Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. The next slide. There you go, Johnny. I think I see the click button now, so I'll be able to move this. Is really just an introduction to me. What is RUBI? It's been about more than a 20-year love affair for me and my colleagues. We set out to develop a program that could help parents manage challenging behaviors that limit a child's life and limit a family and what they can do in their community, maybe limit the kind of school program that a child can be successful in part because there was no program like it before. And when we were working on this and trying to design this program, we realized that there was no one who really ever done this specifically for children with autism. And then we embarked upon years of research and trying to perfect the program. It's now come full circle, and we are in a position to be talking a lot about this to clinicians all around the world, and also in presentations like this to parents directly. At its heart, RUBI Parent Training is a clinical program that is designed for kids who have, challenges in behavior, times where tantrums or anger and frustration and just general problems managing their emotions might get in the way of their everyday experiences and slow them down and slow their families down. Our goal with RUBI is to help parents help their kids have a happier life. And one of the things that I'm trying to do in a presentation like this, when we're talking to probably a large audience of parents, but also I think there are some clinicians in the room, our hope is that in presentations like this, you get a feel for what the parent training program is like. You might walk away with some ideas that you can implement. But of course, in a large group like this, I'm not going to be able to give you really specific and individual advice for your child. RUBI was developed. These techniques that we have tried to perfect in this program were developed for children as young as 3 years of age and tested on kids up through age 12. And we know that they can still be applied to teenagers and to adults. And to be honest with you, a lot of these same principles are things that I use in my everyday life to manage my own behavior. For instance, when we talk about antecedent management in a few minutes, I could probably give you examples of how I try to structure my own life so that I'm more likely to be successful with what I want to do every day. So there's room here for every family to see opportunity in making some improvements. But I also want you to keep in mind that the intervention to really work and to be applied for your family may mean that you have to work with a therapist who is trained in RUBI. If there are therapists here today who have spent some time thinking about RUBI or maybe trying to do it, I hope you benefit from this discussion as well, because you'll get a chance to hear how I've talked about this with families over the years. Before I get into some of the specifics, let me just highlight who I am. I'm the chief psychologist here at Nationwide Children's Hospital. I've been doing this kind of work for a very long time. I've been working with families and children with autism for, gosh, I gotta now say 30 years. It feels like odd to say that, but I started as an undergraduate student and pursued my doctoral degree and my training ultimately in clinical psychology to try to help families with challenging situations like this. I'm currently a professor at the Ohio State University. I work in the departments of pediatrics and psychology as well as psychiatry. And we still are doing research in RUBI as well as in other behavioral interventions for autism, as well as looking at biomedical causes and genetic underpinnings of autism. Our research lab is robust and we do lots of different things. I'm excited to share this information with you here today. And like I said, I hope you walk away even with just one new idea or one sense of how to try something different with a person with autism in your life, then we will have achieved our goal. So let me get started. Oh, I guess maybe just a point about why we call it RUBI. And so RUBI actually is a weird name. It stands for Research Units on Behavioral Intervention. And it's a research unit of the National Institutes of Health, who specifically the National Institutes of Mental Health funded some of our research early on. And so the term just stuck. We never changed it, and it was kind of a cute term. You know, RUBI. It makes you think of a pretty ring that you might have on your finger with a nice jewel on it, right? I don't have any ruby rings, but maybe other people do. And then I just call this gems, where I'm trying to give you some gems, some little nuggets of information that I think can be helpful to you, with the idea that it will help you monitor a child's behavior and maybe actually sustain some changes. But again, this is not meant to be a clinical program. I can't possibly do that with 230 people on a Zoom call. It's really just meant to be me transferring some information to you, some little gems of knowledge that maybe you could use. And of course, the term is meant to be sort of fun, right? RUBI, gems, I think you get it. Let me get started. And I want to start just by setting the stage. What do you do when you have a problem, just in general? I won't ask you to chat it in, but maybe be thinking silently in your head. What's the answer to this? Well, the answer is, when you have a problem, you need a solution, right? This is not rocket science. I'm trying to be a little tongue-in-cheek here, but just keeping it simple. If you are looking for a solution, you're going to be best if you have support in both finding and then implementing that solution. Not doing this yourself. It's hard to do this by yourself. Ultimately, a lot of families benefit from working with a therapist, somebody who knows RUBI and can really implement it really well. When you don't have that, it's good to have a co-caregiver, a co-parent, a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, a friend of the family who can help you think about these things. Once you have a solution and you have some support, how do you know when and how to use them? I'm pausing just to let your mind think about a possible answer to this. How do you know when and how to use the support that you've garnered and the solutions that you're coming up with? Well, you have to have a plan. So we have a problem, we need a solution, or it's going to be a better solution if we have support. And if we put that all together, we end up with something we will call a plan. So that leads me to one of the first pivotal foundations of trying to support an autistic child's behavior. You need a plan. And what does that really mean? It means that whatever you're doing, you're going to write it down. Even if what you did today didn't work, it's good to keep track of it in some way. Keep a journal. You know, write it on napkins and put the napkins in a drawer that you can pull out and read later. It doesn't matter what you write it on, but write it down so that you have some record and some ability to trace back what you've done, what you've tried, how did it work. Keeping track of it is really important. What it does, it begins to create a roadmap for you of what strategies are successful and what strategies may be things you should put away and forget about doing. When you write it down, you're more likely to be able to share it with your support system, with your child's support system. You could say to a teacher, we did X, and it seemed to have this kind of impact. It also allows you to update it. You know, this worked really well on this day, it didn't work really well on that day. And then on the third day, what are you going to expect, right? Well, whatever happens on the third day, you write it down too. And now you begin to see a potential pattern of behavior. If you're not writing it down, if you're not keeping track of it in some way, then your power to really have a good solution, to have a solution that you can work with and adapt and change over time isn't going to be there. So I really like to start this conversation by just saying, whether you're actually working with a therapist or not, it's good to keep track of what you're doing. Find a way to write it down. I really value just having a notebook as a good way to keep track of these things. Now that you know that whatever you're going to do, you're going to write down, you're going to build a plan, you're going to be doing it with other people, you're going to be talking to other people in your child's life, you're going to try to garner some support for yourself. What are the solutions that the universe of solutions that we might come up with? And that's what the rest of this presentation is going to be about. And it starts with learning to think about behavior in a new way. And the first thing to appreciate is that all behaviors are learned. Now, this may not be an easy thing to hear, and it sometimes is misunderstood what we mean by this. Because who wakes up someday and says, I'm going to teach my child to behave in a way that is counterproductive or disruptive or challenging or difficult, or that limits their world? I mean, that's in the end how I always think about this. I don't want to make a child do anything they don't want to do. I don't want to make a parent make a child do anything they don't want to do. But there are things that we want children to be able to do. There are things that we want children to have available to them, to be able to go to a friend's birthday party, to be able to go shopping without having a tantrum, to be able to go to the zoo and not be afraid of animals when they're there. There are things that we want kids to be able to do. There are things that kids want to do that would open up their world. But yet maybe sometimes challenging behaviors get in the way of that. And so we recognize that we want to change those behaviors. And we have to start by recognizing that those behaviors are there because they're learned. The good news about that is anytime a behavior has been learned, it can also be unlearned or relearned a different way. The thing to ask yourself is, when you see a challenging behavior happening, when you're experiencing it, you have to ask yourself, why is this happening? Can I answer the why? And it's okay if you come up with 4 or 5 or 10 different reasons why you think it might be happening. In fact, the more answers you come up with, the better. There's never only one possible answer. There's more than one. And chances are there's more than one that actually is driving the behavior. But it's a good place to start by asking the question and seeing how many answers you can come up with. I'm going to now talk to you about some ways in which you could try to refine this process. We tend to call this search for the why, the journey of discovery, as looking for the function of the behavior. Now, a lot of these words are clinical words that a lot of people could leave behind and not use ever again in the future. But this is one that I really like parents to begin to use, because it's a shorthand way of describing a whole bunch of stuff. What is the function of the behavior? And at the heart of it, we're trying to figure out why the behavior works for a child. What does it get them? You know, sometimes behaviors get us out of things we don't want to do. They help us avoid doing things, right? So we call that escape sometimes. Another thing that often behavior gets us is it gets attention from people. I make a post on Facebook or Instagram and I want someone to hit like or love all the time, right? I'm making an effort to get some attention from somebody when I'm engaging in social media. When kids behave in a certain way, sometimes it's just to get our attention. A third and very common thing is tangible. Kids want to get something. You behave in order to act on your environment, to get something back from your environment, to get a piece of candy, to get a toy, to get access to your iPad. Then the other thing that happens is sometimes we behave in such a way because it just feels good. You know, I sometimes like just to run my fingers through my hair because I'm losing it and I want to remember that it's there. Or I want to feel how soft it is. And that just feels automatically rewarding to me to do that. And a question I throw out to you is, what other ways might parents explain functions? Are there other ways that you think about this? A common one is, and this is probably very true, and I want to underscore it, is that behavior is a communication attempt. And that's very true. And that's not inconsistent with what you see on the slides. A child's trying to communicate that I don't want to do this anymore, escape. The child's trying to communicate, hey, I'm over here, pay attention to me. Or a child's trying to communicate, I want that. Or a child's communicating, this feels good, right? I like tapping my foot on the table, right? It just feels good. That's why I keep doing it. It's a very common way we talk about functions of behavior is that it's a communication, but the question is, what are they trying to communicate? And almost always you can derive it down to one of these four functions. And it's important to keep it this simple. You can make it more complex than this, but in all the years that I've been thinking about this and working with thousands of families, I've never had a need to come up with a fifth or sixth or seventh function. It's really about escape, getting attention, getting something I want, or that it just, gosh golly, feels good to me in the moment. So another way to remember this is escape is trying to get away from something that a child doesn't want to do. A task, a person, a place they don't want to be. A tangible reward or a tangible function of behavior is some kind of reward. It's something they prefer. It's a food, a video. I want to get what I want. An attention function is a peer, a caregiver, a parent, a teacher. Pay attention to me. Look at me. Look what I'm doing. And I like the way that feels is another way to think about automatic functions. It produces some kind of internal state that is pleasing to us. This is an extremely important foundation of wanting to change behavior, is really knowing why it's happening. And every single time we are confronted with a behavior problem that is difficult to change, difficult to understand, I always ask the parents that I work with, well, why do you think this is happening? Let's spend some time thinking about that. Maybe we don't understand the why if we're not able to change it. If we're not able to help the child cope better, we probably aren't really understanding why they're behaving this way. We developed something in the field called the ABC model, a way of trying to help us get information to better understand the functions of a behavior. The first step in the ABC model is actually the focus on the middle letter, the B, the behavior. We want to make sure that we clearly are defining the behaviors that we're seeing. In our RUBI program, we talk about behaviors have to be really clear actions. If you're running a video camera, can you see this behavior? What does it actually look like? Right? Can you visualize it? Can you close your eyes and see it? I can't close my eyes and see happy, but I can close my eyes and see someone smiling or hear someone laughing in my head if I'm thinking about what happy is, right? So the behavior is laughing, the behavior is smiling. Another way to think about this is a behavior is something you can count. Yes. A behavior is also something you can time. I can count how many times I laughed today. I can count how long I was smiling for, right? Behaviors can be counted and timed. They can be visualized. And when you are able to describe a behavior like smiling or laughing or hitting or kicking instead of angry or mad or irritable or happy or joyful, right? Those are good words, but they're not behaviors. The behavior is instead something we can count and time. And that's really the first step to thinking like a person who's going to be able to support behavior in a child with autism. One of the ways that I try to instill this in the people I work with is I say, what's happening here? And so look at this image. Can you think about, feel free to chat in if you wanted, but what do you see happening? What are the behaviors? It's a static image, right? But it's, this little girl is either a really good actress or she's at a tough moment in life. But she has behaviors written all over this picture. And it would be useful for a parent to say to me, she's screaming. She's clutching the grocery cart handle really hard. She's crying. It's not helpful to say she's having a meltdown. That may be true. It's not helpful to say she's having a tantrum. That may be true. What is helpful is to describe exactly what she's doing. What are the things that I can count in time? It's really important to be very specific. Not just what you see happening, not just what you can count in time, but to be thoughtful about where it's happening, who's around, what's the location, what time did it start, what time did it end. The specificity that you try to provide can change from one behavior to the next. The specifics you identify might be a little bit different than what another parent identifies. But if you force yourself to be very specific in describing a behavior, you and the people that you've put around you to help support a child's behavior are going to have a much better shot at trying to change it. Specificity is really important. The other way to think about this is a series of a few other questions. And questions. And questions. Don't stop asking questions. Most of us are comfortable giving advice. What we should really do, and what the people who you ask to support you should do, is ask more questions. Don't give me advice. When does it happen? Okay, when else does it happen? For how long is it happening? Does it ever happen longer than that? What happens when it's shorter? How's that different? Where is it happening? Where else does it happen? Who's around? Who's there? Who else is there? Who else is there? Who else is there? It's okay to ask a whole bunch of questions, just like you're a badgering lawyer in a courtroom on like Law and Order or something, right? You want to ask questions so much of yourself. You want your partners to ask questions of you, the people who are supporting you in this behavior support plan, to ask you questions. Keep asking questions, because the answers are going to help you decide if you have the right function of the behavior. How often does it happen? And then the question in red is my favorite question. When does it not happen? We spend so much time thinking about the challenging behavior that is interfering with a child's everyday life, interfering with the things that bring them joy, preventing them from building relationships and going new places. We spend all this time talking about when and how and where and who around that situation, that we stop thinking about, gee, are there ever times where we're more successful? Are there ever times where these behaviors are not happening? And your answer to that question is going to also help you understand the function. Let's shift away from the B to the A in the ABC model, away from behavior and on to antecedent. What is happening right before the behavior happens? And then we'll focus on the C, the consequence. What happened right after? Because by answering those questions, you now are thinking about the whole behavior stream, the trigger, the behavior, and the consequence. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. So we are very focused in this approach, and the whole RUBI model has been based upon this idea of teaching parents to always think behaviorally. This is the first session. If you go to see a RUBI therapist, this is the first session that you'll get. The focus will be on teaching, really working with the therapist to figure out how the functions of behavior are working in your child's life. They'll focus on making sure that you are thinking specifically about the behavior in ways that it can be counted and timed, and that you understand the idea that all behaviors have something that occur right before the behavior happens, and all behaviors are followed by some kind of consequence. This shows you that behavior stream just pictorially. Antecedents happen, then behaviors, and then consequences. Let's practice. I'm going to ask my tech experts to show the video.
Can I have a brownie?
Oh, not right now, honey. All right, it's lunchtime.
But why?
Because it's lunchtime. It's not time for brownies.
Open it.
I said it's not time for brownies.
Open it. Open it.
All right, you can have one brownie. That's it now.
Now, feel free to make any comments in the chat about this video. One question is, why is this child having a difficult time with his mom right now? Some might call that a meltdown. Some might call it a fight. Some might call it a tantrum. Why is he having a problem? And you can probably come up with a whole bunch of ideas and answers to that question. But if you're thinking behaviorally, you're going to actually answer that question with more questions. And I can see in the chat, some people are already doing that. The first thing I always ask people to do is what? Describe the behavior. What is he doing? He's asking for a brownie. He's stomping his feet. He's starting to respond with a high-pitched voice. He's starting to whine. You might even call that fighting with his mom. He has a clenched fist. He's pushing the brownies into her. I mean, we can keep describing the behaviors very specifically, but the end result is he wants this brownie. He's asked her for it. What did she do? She said no. And what did his behavior do? He stomped again. He pushed the brownies, right? He kept persisting. Ultimately, what happened? What's the consequence to his behavior? Mom gave him the brownie. Okay, stop. We didn't even look at antecedents yet. Of course, the first antecedent was he asked for a brownie. The consequence is after he engaged in some behavior, stomping his feet, pushing the brownie into her. The consequence is she gave him the brownie. Stop and ask yourself, what is he learning? What is he learning? I asked for a brownie. She says no. I stomp my feet. I pushed into her. I get the brownie. I've learned that an effective way to communicate that I want a brownie is to behave just like that, right? So when I said earlier, all behaviors are learned, this mom didn't wake up one day saying, I'm going to teach my kid to stomp his feet and cry and whine and push to get what he wants. But that's what's happening. We have to recognize that that's what's happening. And so to unlearn this, we have to figure out a way to break it up. But that's next. Right now, there's still some things to think about. I usually like to look at this case, and in this case example, we call this little boy Mason. I've worked, he's been in my life now for 25 years. We've been working with these videos for a long time. We had earlier videos that were less fun than these ones that we did. So this little character, Mason, has been in my life for a long time. And this asking for a brownie and not getting it and stomping his feet, I've been thinking about it for a while. And so I have a whole bunch of possible antecedents in my head. Of course, the first antecedent is I want a brownie. That's what he asked for. But what else is there? I saw someone in the chat earlier mentioned, how did he get access to the brownie? Where was it? Exactly right, right? Was it on a counter? Was it out in the open? Was it behind a cabinet door that he could open and reach? Right? He somehow had access to that brownie, and he could walk out of the kitchen to the dining room table and ask for it from mom. So that implies an intervention, doesn't it? It says, gee, we might want to put those brownies in a place where he can't access them. The next thought that I have is he hungry? What time of day is it? How far away from it is it when he had lunch? Or how far away from it is when he had breakfast? How close is it to his next meal? What did he eat at his last meal? Right? I'm thinking about all those things too, because that might influence this behavior and be an antecedent to him actually just being hungry. I know when I'm hungry, I reach for the fastest, quickest source and most fun food I can find, right? Another thing to think about is, what was mom doing? She's just sitting there at that table reading a book, a big book. Maybe she's a law school student. Maybe she's a med school student. Maybe she just likes reading big books. But regardless, she's not paying attention to him. Maybe it isn't about the brownie at all, right? Maybe it's about getting mom's attention. Right now, we don't really understand the function of this behavior, other than the fact he got the brownie after he stomped his foot. Right? The antecedents are unclear to us what might be driving the behavior, but we do know the consequence is counterproductive for us. So we know a lot more about this than you might have thought about just watching the video. One way to keep track of all this is to use some kind of ABC data sheet. This is an example of one of them. I bet you if you put ABC data sheet into the Google, the Google machine will give you back a whole bunch of different versions of this. This is the one we use in RUBI. You can also, in your notebook, just write down 3 columns: antecedent, behavior, consequence. Obviously, we have a whole bunch of other columns on here for people to keep track of some data, but this is one way that we ask people to do it. It doesn't have to happen this way. What does have to happen is, as I told you earlier, keep a journal, keep writing it down, because you need a few examples before you start to see a pattern, before you really understand why a child's behaving a certain way. If we understand antecedents, we can begin to think about prevention strategies. We can think about antecedent management strategies. That's another way to say prevention strategies. For instance, in the video we just saw, we've already identified a couple of these. Control the environment, number 2 on my list. That's exactly what I was suggesting, right? Just like someone was suggesting in the chat. Those brownies were available. They were somehow accessible in his environment. Maybe we need to move them around, put them someplace where he can't get them. Another prevention strategy on this list that I've already suggested for this case is all the way down at the bottom, second from the bottom, address setting events. A setting event is something that just makes us set up to have a behavior problem. I might be hungry. Maybe that's why I'm asking for a brownie. Other kinds of setting events that people experience, we all wake up on the wrong side of the bed sometimes. Sometimes we have insomnia the night before. We didn't get a good night's sleep. We're going to be more grumpy that day, right? If I've missed my medication, if a child has a seizure disorder and they had a seizure that day, if I got into a fight with my spouse, or if my parents got into a fight in front of me. Last night, I was getting dressed, coming back from the gym. I really don't like working out. And I was excited about getting home and getting dinner. And I broke my shoestring. It just ripped. I was so mad. I had to walk with my shoes flopping around. That put me in a bad mood. And then when I got home, I was in a bad mood. And dinner wasn't as good as it could have been. I was set up by that little daily hassle of breaking my shoestring, right? We can all be set up to have behavior problems and respond in different ways. And when that happens, it's good just to maybe be low key, change demands, change what you expect of yourself, or in the case of your children, expect what you're expecting of them to change too. One of my favorites on this list is doing things in small doses. It's really hard to ask a kid to clean up all his toys. She has all her crayons thrown out on the floor, all her Legos are thrown on the floor, all her dolls are on the floor. And you say, you got to clean up this mess. Well, maybe it's easier to ask a child to clean up if there's only 1 or 2 things left on the floor. Maybe you go in ahead of time and you clean up everything. And then leaving 1 or 2 things out, you ask the child to come in and clean up the mess. It's not as overwhelming. The next time you ask them to clean up, it's cleanup time. Maybe you leave 4 or 5 things out. The next time, maybe it's 7 or 8 things. You get my point. You incrementally increase the amount of work you expect out of a child. If maybe you have trouble on shopping trips and you ultimately want your child to be successful going to the grocery store, you may first make a trip where you just run in really quickly, grab that half gallon of milk at the near the checkout line that they have these days, and check out and leave. And so there's no time for there to be problems. But instead, what happens is the next time you go, you maybe add 2 more items to the list. And then the next time you go, you add 3 more items. You get my point. We do things in small doses or small steps, and that helps us move toward more regular and maintained behavior. There are other ways in which we can prevent problem behaviors. I'm just highlighting a couple of them here, but this is really the way we try to approach managing those antecedents that occur before a behavior problem happens. One of the most important things that I have found in working with children with autism is to focus on schedules. Sometimes just changing the time of a demand can be helpful. For instance, maybe doing your bath in the morning is good for some kids. Maybe for other kids, it's disruptive and it slows you down and makes you late for school. So instead we do our bath at night, right? We also use this strategy in green very often, where we use fun activities to reward the completion of more desired activities. You got to clean up your toys in your playroom before you go outside. You got to hang up your coat on the coat rack before you get to play your video game, right? Do your work before you get something fun. Eat your green beans before you have your ice cream, right? This happens to all of us all the time. It's the way we were raised. Another really important thing in orange at the bottom of this slide is to be thoughtful about building routines. We all benefit from having structure and having routines. I'm normally doing something else at 4 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm not, or it's Wednesday, right? On a Wednesday afternoon. I'm not normally here. This is out of routine for me. I was really excited about being here. It's novel, it's fun. But normally I'm doing something else. And we all have schedules. We all follow routines. We know what our schedules are like. It makes us feel good to know and to have prediction to what we're doing. It also makes us feel good to have fun and surprises too. But most of us function on a routine, and so will our kids. And so it's good to have that. The other thing to appreciate though about kids' schedules is it's sometimes hard to keep track of your schedule. Anyone who works with me, including this whole expert hub team, knows this. I am really bad at managing my schedule. It's a good thing it's written down. Otherwise, I wouldn't know where I'm supposed to be at any point in time. And you probably have seen and maybe have used visual schedules like you see here on the slides. There's lots of internet resources. We have resources that we can share with you about how to build visual schedules for kids with autism. But keep in mind, we all use a visual schedule. We all have calendars and planners and our phones that tell us where to be and what to do at any given moment. And by having a visual schedule, it helps us feel like we're more in control of our lives and helps us be more responsive to the routines that are available to us. I'm going to show you a quick video here of just how we use a daily schedule in RUBI and how we try to teach it. So here you see a morning schedule for a kid. These picture icons
Okay, you're all
representing
done brushing your teeth. Put it in the bag. Very good. Now what do we have to do? Put on coat, okay? So let's go. Take it. All right, let's go put on your coat. Come on, let's go.
So here you see mom with Mason teaching him how to use the schedule.
Good, you put on your coat. Let's put that in the bag.
A lot of help
next?
and support right now.
Put on backpack, okay? Let's go. Come on, let's go put it on.
So he's a child learning how to use his visual schedule very early on in the process. Eventually, he'll get more independent with it. My main goal here today is to help you realize and appreciate and normalize that we all use a visual schedule, and teaching kids to do that earlier on in their development can be helpful. Daily schedules inform that we are communicating between caregivers and with our child about what they're doing and what they're doing next. It allows us to potentially identify inconsistencies in our daily schedules and to help build those routines. It highlights the importance of consistency and communication among family members because we're all focusing on using the same visual schedule. In some ways, the visual schedule helps us be more consistent for our child. And then it also helps us identify those places and those times where we might more likely have some behavior problems. It allows us to strategize where we can maybe fix some things that are happening in the day that are tough or difficult. The next strategy that I'm going to talk about is a consequence strategy. How do we reinforce good behavior? How do we say good job? How do we praise our children for the things that they're doing that we want to see them do more of? A reinforcer is anything that increases the chance of a behavior occurring again in the future. So if I told you that mom reinforced Mason's behavior for the brownie stomping, you'd have to agree with me, right? Because he's more likely to stomp to get the brownie in the future. She is rewarding that behavior. So we have to be thoughtful about this. We have to make sure we're rewarding behaviors we want to see. We want to make sure we're rewarding behaviors that open up a child's world and doesn't limit them. It's good to think creatively about reinforcers. Make sure that you know what makes your child feel good. The most effective reinforcement that we offer kids are going to be those reinforcers that are offered when the child is actually doing a behavior we want to see, right? The thing to do is you don't want to reward a behavior that is negative or counterproductive or disruptive. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of kids have privileges, access to things every day that they do, and they have free access for it, and it makes them feel good. It might be that you turn those into reinforcers. And as I was hinting at just a second ago, the timing of delivering that reinforcer is really important. If that mom in that earlier video with Mason stomping his foot and asking for a brownie, if she told him, why don't you sit down in the chair and maybe I'll give you the brownie. And then he sits down in the chair and she says, okay, you can have the brownie. At least then, instead of giving it to him for stomping his feet, she's giving it to him because he did something she asked, right? That would have been a better outcome if she knew she was going to give him the brownie. Let's take a look at timing.
Hey guys, you're cleaning up and I didn't even have to ask you. All right, I'm gonna get you guys a treat.
Hey, look what I found. Mine. 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 Give me that.
Hey guys, don't fight. Hey, look. Here. All right, we're fighting.
Wow. I hope what you appreciate here is this mom missed an opportunity, right? There was some productive behavior happening, but then the negative behavior started. At that point, she's lost her opportunity to reward, but then she does. And so again, think about what is the function of this behavior of kids fighting. In this case, these kids have learned to fight because mom rewards them to stop them. Not a good outcome here. We actually have outlined an 8-step model for delivering reinforcement to a kid. This can be complicated, and maybe we've made it overcomplicated because it's 8 different steps. But you got to know what you're reinforcing, what behavior you're reinforcing. Remember, behaviors are things you can count in time, right? You want to make sure that you're willing to reinforce an amount of the behavior that is potentially challenging for the child, but it still may be very small, right? Something that may seem really small to you might be worth reinforcing, especially if it's hard for the child to do. You also got to decide on the frequency of reinforcement. At first, we want to reinforce the behavior that we want to see strengthened, that we want to see more of. We want to reinforce it every single time. And the timing, again, is important. You want to make sure you're reinforcing it right away. You want to make sure you're reinforcing it right when it's happening. I've missed my opportunity to reinforce Dr. Barton for making a chat comment because she made it 15 seconds ago. I should have reinforced her right when she made it. We use it contingently. We use our reinforcement in a way that says you did A, therefore I'm telling you you did a good job, right? We use it because you did something. You have to maintain limited access and value to the reinforcer. Good job to our resources team for just posting about the tip. Andrew is highlighting something that Maddie did that he really likes, and I'm reinforcing Andrew for doing that in the chat. It's contingent, it's well-timed, it's specific. I'm using social reinforcement right now. That's all I'm using. But sometimes with kids, we have to use something more. We have to give a treat. We have to give access to a favorite activity or toy or electronic. But we still should use social reinforcement too, because guess what? That's how social reinforcement gets its value. It gets value. Good job feels good to us because sometimes it's also paired with something else, a more tangible reinforcer. It's also okay to use visual reminders of your reinforcements. If you do this, then you get this, and that can be depicted in a pictorial contract. First this, then that. You probably have used first then boards like that before, I bet. Let's take a look at catching them being good.
Hey guys, you are playing so well together. That's great.
I like the thing.
Guys, you're doing a really good job sharing. It's really nice.
Notice how she's coming in. The timing is good. She's being specific. It's contingent on what they're doing.
Hey, you having fun? Huh? Yeah, I'm proud of you. You're playing really well together. It's good.
This may seem artificial and awkward. That's okay. It works. And eventually we'll stop feeling so artificial and so awkward. The other thing that we like to talk about is make sure you create positive time with your kids. It's really important to spend special time with your kids, time where you are not necessarily putting demands on them. And that time should be a time where you're just observing your child, like the play-by-play announcer during a football game or a basketball game who just describes what they see. That's all you need to do with your kids to play with them effectively. Just describe what you see. You're pushing the car. You're moving that doll. I mean, again, it sounds weird and sounds awkward, but it is no demand on the child, and the child's feeling positive because you're present with them and encouraging them. If you want to do anything, just imitate what they're doing. If they push a car, you push the car. If they color the sky purple, you comment on it and say, wow, look at the purple sky. I think I'm going to make my sky green. You don't tell them sky is blue, right? You let them be creative. In this special time, you don't put demands on them, because guess what? When you're getting them ready for school, when you're getting them to stop playing a video game, to come eat dinner, you're putting demands on them all day long. You have to have some time during the day where it's just you and the child having a good time. Describe what you see, describe the play, reflect on what they're saying, praise play behaviors that are positive, and really try to avoid any questions or demands when you're trying to create positive time with your child. And so the last intervention that we talk about today is talking about what behaviors do we ignore. There are some behaviors we pay attention to. The behaviors we pay attention to are the ones that are going to increase. Behaviors that we pay attention to that we don't want to see, but we do pay attention to them, they're going to increase too. So the thing that we want to highlight is there are some behaviors that we just want to ignore. Now, this isn't about ignoring your child. This is about ignoring behaviors that your child's doing that are maladaptive for them, that are problematic for them, that are problematic for your family, that are shutting down opportunities for your child, so that they can be replaced by more productive behaviors. The last point in this slide is really important. Behaviors we initially ignore will always get worse. And if we respond, just like that mom did in that first video, stomped his feet, pushed into her, whined and cried, at some point he kept escalating and she responded at that level, guess what? Next time he's going to be comfortable going past that level to get what he wants. Right? If we respond to a child's behavior, they've learned that that's where I need to get. And they'll keep getting to that level and they'll go beyond it to get what they want, to get what they need, to escape what they don't want to do. Let's take a look at training strong resistance, like I've just described. How do we teach kids to be really strong in their resistance to us?
Here. Peanut butter and jelly, come on. Sit up.
Chicken nuggets.
No, we're not having chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets.
Sweetie,
Chicken nuggets.
we are not
chicken
having.
nuggets.
You had chicken
Chicken
nuggets
nuggets.
yesterday.
Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken
Never-
nuggets.
Look at this.
Chicken nuggets.
This is your favorite kind. Mommy made it for
Chicken
you.
nuggets. Chicken nuggets.
Look at me. Look
Chicken
at me.
nuggets.
We're not having chicken nuggets again today.
Chicken nuggets.
Chicken, you can't have that every
Chicken
day.
nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets.
Okay. All right, fine. All right. Go get you some chicken nuggets.
So I hope what you saw here is the sandwich came out. He started saying chicken nuggets. She kept trying to coax him, persuade him to eat the sandwich. He kept saying, no, I want chicken nuggets. I want chicken nuggets. He was repetitive. He was focused. He was persistent. And she eventually says, okay, I give up. He wore her down. And look, that happens to all of us all the time. These videos sometimes can be really silly, but every parent I've ever showed them to has told me, I do that. I've done that. And we're not showing these to make anyone feel bad. Yes, this is very much what happens in everyday life. That's why we've made these videos like this. The reality of it is that even though we do it, and we all do it, it also is causing the child to be more resistant. Let's take a look at this.
Can I go to the park?
Oh, Honey, it's too cold out today.
I want to go to the park, please.
No, it's, you know why? It's really cold out today.
I want to go to the park.
Nathan, I said not today.
I want to go to the park.
No.
I want to go to the park.
All right.
I want to go to the park.
All right, you know what? How about you want some brownie?
Yes.
All right here.
You got the whole brownie. Now notice here, he didn't get to go to the park, but what did he get instead? Pretty good consolation prize, right? Obviously not a good idea. Let's answer the question on the slide. It's not a good idea to do that. But you saw what was happening. She kept engaging him. He kept escalating. He kept throwing things. And eventually she's searching for something. God, what do I have? Here, eat this brownie. That was her strategy out of this. And it's not a good idea because it's teaching him that he'll always get something good out of having a tantrum. So we recommend ignoring. We recommend making sure that you avoid eye contact when talking to a child, that you do not touch a child when you're engaging with them, that you use neutral facial expressions, and that if your child's talking to you, you're not talking back during this moment where they're asking or behaving in a way that you see as counterproductive to their long-term success. It's okay to make your ignoring obvious and exaggerated. Really, literally, you just look away. And then as soon as your child stops the behavior you don't want to see, you respond to them right away. You show them the contrast between their behavior and your attention. I have just another point or two to make. Let's take a look at this video.
But he did show up. I know. They, yep. Stop it. Yeah. Okay. No, I know.
Mom.
Yeah, well, she was talking to me about it the other day, and she was saying that. Can you hang on 1 second? I said, stop it now. Go in the other room. Go in the other room. Stop it. Sorry.
Mom.
Yeah,
Mom.
mm-hmm.
Mom.
Well, you know what? I'll give him a
Mom.
call, and we'll find out what's going on.
Mom.
So what's really powerful here is to appreciate that she was trying to ignore, but not completely doing it, and instead getting frustrated and responding intermittently. And that's just making the problem worse too. The reality of it is you want to plan ahead. Look, when I'm on the phone, it'll be really important for you to be doing something else. And when I'm done on the phone, I will come do that something else with you. And whatever the something else is, you plan with your child about what's fun, but you have some kind of plan, and you make sure that that plan is your child knows what you're doing and they know what they're supposed to be doing. And then you ignore their attempts to get your attention. And if they start doing the plan, you might actually pull away from the phone and say, good, I'm so glad you're doing that. I'll be off the phone in just a second, right? The best thing to do in these situations is to have some kind of plan that gets reinforced and other behaviors get ignored. This doesn't mean you don't love your child, but responding to your child in the moment, rather than having a plan ahead of time, really does result in strengthening the behavior. We're coming up close to the time that I want to break and make sure that we have an opportunity for you to wrap up with the rest of our team. But I do want to just make sure that everyone, if you're going to use planned ignoring, that you're prepared for the challenges. Behavior will get worse before it gets better when you're ignoring it. And some behaviors just can't be ignored. You know, if a child's doing something dangerous, you're going to have to prevent them from doing that. You're going to have to break some of the rules, like touching them. But you still cannot talk to them, not try to problem solve with them. But you can prevent them from getting hurt or running away. Recognize that children can learn to be persistent. If you're going to have to give in when you plan to ignore, give in as early as possible, actually. Don't persist and persist and persist and then give in, because all you're doing is making the behavior stronger. And recognize when you're implementing planned ignoring, it can take a while for it to work. All right, I think I'll stop there and give us an opportunity to wrap up and see if there are any questions that maybe were left unanswered in the chat that our team wants to address or wants me to address.